joining us today on Coastal Progressive and Rainbow Forum on Society Bites Radio. Today we will be speaking with Kevin Held and Jason T. Gaffney, and we're welcoming them back for a new segment this week. And we're going to be talking about My Pet Hippo Productions, the name of their production company, and their mission statement, and some of the films they have done, and some of the other work. They have a great body of work, and these are two very talented young men. And welcome, Jason and Kevin.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us again.
Thank you.
Good to be back.
Glad to be on the show.
Great. Listen, why don't one of you, whichever one wants to jump in, tell our listeners a little bit about My Pet Hippo Productions. You have an interesting background on your company and your outlook and the way you do your films. When I read it, I was absolutely fascinated, and that's what got me more interested in the work that you do.
Well, let me.
Cool.
This is Kevin, and I know I'm jumping in ahead of Jason, but I just want to be very, very clear that My Pet Hippo is Jason's company, Jason and his husband together. And I have been very fortunate to work with the company, it's not my company. We formed the podcast together, but that I'm very lucky to have been working with them a number of times. And very, very grateful, and I can't wait for more collaborations. But it is not my baby; it is theirs.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Jason.
So My Pet Hippo Productions actually came about. I basically, a long time ago, I figured out I wanted to be an actor. I started in the stage productions, and then as I got older, I realized I actually was really well suited for film and film life. And as I started doing more films, I realized I also really enjoyed making films and telling stories. And so I actually founded a company with my folks a while back called Small or Large Productions. And after a while, I moved out to the West Coast, and I decided to branch out and make my own production company called My Pet Hippo Productions. And one of the things that I fell in love with making films was kind of telling stories from my own experiences and own voices, kind of that mentality of, I'm a gay man, I'm an openly gay man, and my husband, Matt, married happily to my husband, Matt Gorlick. And so we founded this production company to make LGBTQ content and LGBTQ-driven content where the conflict has nothing to do with the main characters being LGBTQ+. Basically, we have a mission statement at My Pet Hippo, which is, we think the world is a far more diverse and interesting place than Hollywood blockbusters would have us believe. And our mission is to create high-quality, exciting, and entertaining movies featuring a universe where LGBTQ characters have leading roles that are never based in stereotypes. The main conflicts of our LGBTQ characters aren't created by their sexual orientation. Female characters have roles that go beyond mother, wife, daughter, and or woman in jeopardy. People of color have roles that are never based on stereotypes, and a limited budget does not mean a compromised product. And basically, what I do is I write stories, and oftentimes I'll end up working with my dad as a co-writer, Ed Gaffney. And although in the last film I made, I actually worked with my mom, New York Times bestselling author Suzanne Brockman, on Out of Body, and coming soon. And basically, we formulate these stories where the leads are unapologetically gay, but they're already out of the closet, so there's no coming out, there's no issues with the people about being gay, etc. And it's not to say that our real world doesn't have all these very real issues. For example, I'm sure as everyone's been celebrating the recent SCOTUS ruling, Supreme Court ruling, where it's no longer, you can no longer be fired for being gay and trans. So yay for that. But part of moving forward, in my opinion, in the world, is showing people that we are the same as them. We have the same wants, the same dreams, the same desires. So making films where it's, boy meets boy, boy loses boy, boy wins back boy, is the same as boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy wins back girl, or girl meets boy, girl meets girl, whatever. And so it's that's kind of where My Pet Hippo Productions came from. It's to give that extra voice for the community to show our post coming out stories, what happens after we've come out. And I want to go on the record real quick to just say the coming out story movies are very much needed. We still need them, and there's absolutely a place for them in LGBTQ plus cinema. But for me, I didn't have a dramatic coming out. I got very lucky, and I want to tell the stories that I relate to a little bit stronger in the hopes that our younger generations who are having an easier time coming out, not a completely easy time. Obviously, there's still tragedy stories, etc. But there's more and more people who are cool with it. And as we grow into a society that's more accepting of LGBTQ plus people, I wanted to show movies that really featured that. So that's kind of where My Pet Hippo Productions, the origin story, came from.
Excellent. That I think will help our audience understand, because it is a little different. A lot of people are just used to seeing the films, like you said, about and like you said in your mission statement and so forth there, that it's a conflict because they're LGBTQ or something in that area, and they don't stop to think that LGBTQ people have the same issues, same problems, and same issues that everybody else faces in life, and that's an important distinction, right. I think.
But it's also if you get to the really heart of the matter of like why it's called My Pet Hippo, that when they were naming it, they just looked around and they saw their pet hippo and thought, well, there we go.
That's good.
I so wish I had a pet hippo. I love hippos. They're so much fun.
Oh, that's good. That's very, very good. We've came a long way. We've came a long way. I'm going to insert some little thing in here, and maybe you can relate to this and tell me some stories about this too, that you maybe your thoughts you have along the line. I have a kind of. I'm not saying this to boast or anything. I'm just saying this as part of my life, because I never thought of it to tell later in my life how much different my life had been than other people's. When my last partner, God rest his soul, he was in law enforcement. And I at that time was still in my career and my professional career, and I worked for a very large Fortune 50 corporation and traveled the world doing systems integration. And officially, because my partner was in law enforcement, and the laws were just then changing to that he could not be fired in the police force where he was at, I was officially his landlord. And I can remember all the stuff that we had to go through. We could not go out in public hardly ever together in that community, and we lived in a large city too, where we were at, but we had to go other places. We traveled a lot. That's why we traveled a lot, because when we were out traveling, people did not know who we were or anything. I could have also probably lost my job, right, because our rules were changing in the corporation too, in the corporate world, and it would have been difficult for both of us. So you make a choice. You have a career. For us at that point, it was to have a career or be out, and we chose to have careers. And that's where it is. So that's why this recent Supreme Court ruling is so important to a lot of people, but doesn't stop the discrimination. As we all know, it's still there, and we still face it.
Yeah,
but
sure.
But the world is changing, and we're making progress.
And it's important to remember that there were still 3 people on that very court who didn't believe it, who didn't agree with it.
Exactly.
That still feels like pretty high.
Yes. And, of course, a lot of us we thought it was a miracle we even won it, because a lot of us were prepared for another set of excuses and another defeat. But we did win, and we've got a lot of work to do yet to keep moving forward. And the work that you do, I think, is so good because it does bring laughter and bring characters and into the community where we need it, especially in the world we live in today. Can you share with us any other stories? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of why what you just talked about is another part of why these movies are important for me to make, and why I want to make them, and why it's important for me that the conflict doesn't revolve around their sexual orientation, because everyone in the older generations has fought for our rights to be where we are now, and I I was on the front lines of fighting for marriage equality in Massachusetts. I think I was 17 when the Massachusetts Supreme Court basically said, no, you can't stop gay people from getting married. There's nothing that says they can't. And so the next several years were a lot of legal battles and, elections and fighting to get marriage to be legal in Massachusetts. And part of why I like making these films, which often, I steer towards comedy, just because I like to make people laugh. But part of why I focus on these films is a thank you card to the previous generations that we have the privilege now of being able to accept that we're normal and accept that we're we don't have the same struggles as we used to, and we're growing. And so I don't want us to get trapped in the past, to still respect the past and love it, but to also enjoy the future and the hard work we got to. Because it's always a shame when people say they spend months and months and months saving up to go on a vacation, and then they go to a vacation, they spend the whole vacation worrying about going back to work. It's kind of like, that's my philosophy on these movies. We work so hard to be able to tell a story where it has nothing to do about us being gay, and it's just us being people. Let's enjoy it,
Exactly. Some of the products, some of the ones you mentioned here, I want to let you make some comments on these, because I'm sure listeners do not know. Maybe they'll trigger them to go out on the internet and take a look at some of this. Your movie Analysis Paralysis, which I had the pleasure of seeing, is quite funny. It's a very interesting movie. And you have Out of Body and you have Marriage of Inconvenience. I'd like for you each to comment on these a little bit and tell us a little bit about each of them.
Sure. So Analysis Paralysis was kind of the first project from My Pet Hippo Productions. It was not my first feature that I had made. I'd done a couple with my folks on Smaller Large Productions, The Perfect Wedding and Russian Doll. But Analysis Paralysis was kind of my baby. And I was talking to my dad, and we were trying to figure out how to make an independent feature with a very, very low budget. And so we kind of came up with this concept for a film where the main character struggles with anxiety to the point where he has to play out every outcome of a scenario before he makes a decision or a move. And so, which allowed us to get some great comedy in there. You guys are really going to love some of the stuff Kevin Hill does in it, because you get to see him replay situations as different characters, which is really great. And it allowed us to, for filming purposes, to stay in the same location for a little bit longer than other films might need, and thus allowing us to make the movie for a more reasonable budget. And Analysis Paralysis, you can now see it on Amazon, Google Play, or iTunes. You can rent it or download it. Or if you have a Deku subscription, it's currently streaming on Deku. And do you want to say anything about Analysis Paralysis before I jump forward, Kevin?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that I had just an amazing time making that movie. And I play the love interest of Jason T. Gaffney's main character. And the thing I wanted to mention about Jason is that he is a very rare filmmaker who writes a movie where he casts himself as the lead, but then gives the other guy all the fun stuff to do. So that's a generosity you don't really see in Hollywood a lot. So I hate